Welcome to chapter 9 of the book of Ezekiel, Jerusalem's punishment. And he shouted aloud into my ears with a great voice. And this was the man we saw in the last chapter that was sent to Ezekiel by the man that was on the throne, above the throne, the image of a man. And so this person shouts with a great voice in his ear, saying, "The punishment of the city has approached." So really loud. It's like, oh, wow. The punishment of the city has approached. Now, what time frame is this? Is this a time of Ezekiel that he's talking about, or is it a future time? Because we do, in Ezekiel, does go into the future in the last 10 chapters, and there are certain things in here that I'll bring out that leads me to believe that this still may be for a Jerusalem that is in existence now or in the near future, rather than the time of Ezekiel, but it could be the time of Ezekiel. But I'll just bring out these things that I see. So the time of the punishment of the city. So Jerusalem, here, it doesn't say Jerusalem, but I'm not exactly sure. I was just thinking if it doesn't say any. I don't even see it there, and so it just calls it the city. It doesn't even say Jerusalem, and well, here it is, pouring out rage upon Jerusalem, down in verse 8. So that's where that Jerusalem's punishment came from. Now, Jerusalem is still a city, of course. And does it deserve a punishment? Well, God knows. And each had the items for the devastation in his hand. And behold, 6 men were coming from the way of the high gate, looking to the north, and each had a hewing axe for devastation in his hand. So it's kind of a strange way of saying it here. Each had, and it doesn't say who the each were, and I don't think it was in the last chapter, but no, not that I can think of. So anyway, but it was these men that have these, there's 6 of them coming from the way of the high gate, looking to the north. And each had a hewing axe, some type of an axe that could cut things down in their hands. And here's Jerusalem. Now, the exact gate that came into the temple, the high gate, they came from someplace, but they are coming for devastation. And one man in the midst of them was clothed in a foot-length robe. Apparently he was dressed a little bit different, which set him apart. And a belt, a zoni of sapphire, was upon his loin. So he had around him his waist. He had a zoni. We have a zone, which is the zones that are around the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, the zones around the globe. When you see a globe and they have these zones, like a belt, and that's where it comes from in the zones in geography. And the sapphire is a transliteration into sapphire. What is sapphire? I believe it's a blue stone. And upon his loin. So he looked different with this belt and the robe. And they entered and stood next to the altar of brass. So now, this is the temple of Solomon, something like this. An altar of the altar of brass is up here. So they 6 men are coming in, and they're standing around there, unless it's a temple of the future that's going to yet be built. And the glory of the God of Israel ascended from the cherubim, the glory being upon them, into the open air of the house. So now they're there, but all of a sudden this, whatever the glory, the doxa, the doxology and the liturgy, the glory of God, ascended from the cherubim, came from the cherubim, into the air, open air of the house. And he called the man being clothed with the foot robe. Now, he called, who was the he? Well, the man, I believe, that was above a firmament that had a throne above the firmament, and a man, the image of a man above there, was probably what it's talking about here. And he called the man being clothed with the foot-length robe, who had the belt upon his loin. And the Lord said to him, so it was the Lord that was speaking, and that was the Lord that was up above, that had this bronze and fire, just as it mentions with Jesus in the book of Revelation. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city and the midst of Jerusalem, and put the sign upon the foreheads of the men groaning, and of the ones being grievously afflicted over all the lawless deeds taking place of them. Now, I don't see any place in the second Kings and Chronicles that it mentions anything like this. So, which leads me to believe that it really hadn't occurred yet, and it's something that's going to happen here in the future of this Jerusalem that will be evil, and God will send these 6 men to do this devastation. The reason I say that is it says he goes through the midst of the city, even the midst of Jerusalem, and put the sign upon the foreheads of the men groaning, and of the ones being grievously afflicted over all the lawless deeds taking place in the midst of them. Now, we have our book, entities of the book of Revelation, right here, that finished about maybe 6, 7, 8 months ago. And within this book, it has one of the entities is right here, forehead. I don't know if you can see it. It says forehead. And it goes through and has this long article of these places listed that this forehead was mentioned. I'm turning my light on here so I can read it. And it says in Revelation 7:3, saying, injure not the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, until we seal the bondmen of our God upon their foreheads. So here it's the time of the tribulation, and which goes along with this here about the foreheads, because I don't know of any place else that appears. And it's then in 9:4 it says, and it was said to them that they should not injure the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, except the men only who have not the seal of God upon their forehead. So here it's right here, go in the midst and do this smiting. And then now there was a mark of the beast on their foreheads also, which at the time of the beast. So I'm just bringing that up, and that's mentioned here in Revelation 13:16. Then there was the 144,000, and I saw, and behold, a Lamb standing upon Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father being written upon their foreheads. Could very well be these Jews that are in Jerusalem, the people that right here it says they're grievously afflicted over the lawless deeds taking place in them. They hate it, hate all these things that are going on. And then, of course, the mystery of Babylon name has name was written on the forehead, and then in 22:4 of Revelation, and they shall see his face, and his name is upon their forehead. So the name is their forehead, is Jesus. I see it. And so that's what I believe it's talking about here, not something that happened way back thousands of years ago. And he said to these in my hearing, well, go into the city behind him and smite, and spare not your eyes, and him is probably Ezekiel, spare not your eyes, and you should not show mercy. It's hard for some people to gather that God would command something like that. And I was talking to one lady, and I mentioned obedience to God, and mentioned, would you, if God told you to slay one of your children, would you do it? She says, no, God would never do that. And then I said, well, that's exactly what he did with Abraham. And so God then spared Isaac, but he did call for to test Abraham. In verse 6, it continues, an older man, presbyteron, the Presbyterians, we mentioned it many times, elders of that church, and a young man, and a Parthenon, a virgin, the Parthenon, the building in Athens, Greece, that's dedicated to the Virgin Athena, and infants and women kill unto wiping out. So this is something that was way different than what happened with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar did not kill everybody and wipe them all out. He did a lot of destruction, but there were people that were still left. But yet here, it's a completely different type of destruction from God and the command to wipe out even the infants and the children. So I believe, again, that's referring to a future time. But upon all, upon whom is the sign, you should not approach. So that would be the name of Jesus. And begin from my holy places. And they began from the men of the elders who were inside in the house. Now, this is the ones that had writing all these idolatrous things on the walls of the temple, the holy place. I believe that's probably what's going to happen in the future, that these people are going to write these things, and then they're going to bow down to the beast, show their behinds to God. And so I don't see any of this, the men of the elders inside of the house, any place that was like this that happened earlier, or in the Bible, that is, as far as 2 Kings and Chronicles. And he said to them, the men, 6 men, defile the house, and fill the ways of dead ones, and smite the ones going forth. So they're all to be killed. And it came to pass in their smiting that I fell upon my face, and I yelled out, and I said, Emi, Ive, alas, O Adonai, Kyrie, you wipe away the remnant of Israel in the pouring out of your rage upon Jerusalem. So I believe the rage is going to be poured out on Jerusalem. A new city will be set up called, which will be named at the time, which will be to the west of the Galilee area, probably on Mount Meron. And this is all, we get to this future time in the last 10 chapters. And he said to me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah has been magnified very exceedingly. For the land was filled of many peoples, and the city was filled with iniquity and uncleanness. And Jerusalem is filled with many peoples. I don't know about it's filled with iniquity today or uncleanness, but when the beast arrives, it will be. It goes into that in Revelation. For they say, the Lord has abandoned the land. The Lord inspects not. This is what the people will be thinking. The Lord has nothing to do with any of this. And my eye shall not spare, nor shall I show mercy. I have imputed their ways against their heads. This is in the future. It's going to be a total devastation of Israel like they have never seen before. And behold, the man being clothed with the foot-length robe, and having the belt tied around his loin, even answered, saying, I have done as you gave charge to me. It was done. It will be done, and Jerusalem probably will be finished as a city, except for the New Jerusalem, which comes down from heaven, which is in the last two chapters of the book of Revelation. You can go through, which we've already went through in our video seminars. Continues the likeness of the throne. Again, we see that throne that was mentioned earlier that Ezekiel saw, and we'll go into chapter 10 and we'll find out all about what he saw on this throne. Hope you'll join us in chapter 10. God bless.